In the know.
Good evening, everyone.
In the know.
Tony Reeves, fire. Following the news in any way, shape, or form. No shortage of things to talk about. What does it mean? What will it bring? This is a reality we simply have to accept. Tony Reeves, fire. Tony Reeves. Let's go ahead and get started.
Welcome to another edition of In the Know. I am your host, Tony Reeves, and let's get rocking and rolling. Today I want to talk to you about something that I refer to as embracing life's pauses. And, a lot of times we live in a world where we tend to move 120 miles an hour and we're always rushing to the other thing. But every now and then, you're going to have a moment where life is going to give you an opportunity to pause. Meaning something's not going to be going on and you're going to have the opportunity to take a moment and self-reflect. So I want to share with you one such moment that happened in the course of my life. And so I want to hook you up with a date, May 5th, 1991. May 5th, 1991, and Fort McClellan, Alabama. Now, you're going to probably say to yourself, why are you throwing that date and that location out? Well, May 5th, 1991 was the day after I graduated from college. And Fort McClellan, Alabama was the location of where I would have to go for my officer's basic course once I got commissioned as an Army officer. So for those of you who are sitting here trying to figure out what the heck this means, let me kind of set this up for you for purposes of understanding the point. Now, for those of you who had the opportunity to go off to college or something of that nature, let me kind of tell you where I was at. When I went to college in the fall of '87, my goal was to be a doctor. That's my goal. I was going to major biology, become a doctor, but I also was planning on becoming an officer in the United States Army. So I had those two paths as clearly defined professional paths that I was going to do. So when I got to college, I joined Army ROTC, and I also majored in biology. So as a result, that was my intention going forward. But let me be the first to tell you that sometimes things don't always go the way they seem. Probably around the end of my second year, I started noticing that I was having some struggles in my studies. And I was still passing my classes, but in my mind, I had convinced myself that I was not earning the grades at the level that they needed to be in order for me to be a doctor. So I made the decision that becoming a doctor was not going to be a reality. So at that particular point, I then was going to focus my attention on becoming an active duty Army officer. So for those of you who don't know how this works, typically there are four pathways to become an officer in the military. One is what we call direct commission. That means you come from a specific background whereby like you're a doctor or you're a lawyer, and they basically make you an officer and they send you to a school that lasts about 4 or 5 weeks, 6, 7 weeks to kind of teach you the ins and outs of the mechanics of being an officer. Another one is what we call officer candidate school. That's usually for people who are enlisted and want to make the transition into the officer's corps, and that's another several-month course that you have to go through. The other option is the academy. So, most of us have heard of Colorado Springs, Naval Academy, and Annapolis or West Point and so forth. And then the fourth one is to participate in the Reserve Officers Training Corps in college, which is what I did. So what ends up happening is that you go through 3 years, and then what happens is that you have, between the summer of your junior and your senior year, you go to an advanced camp where your leadership skills are evaluated, you're given a score, and then that score, coupled with your 3 years going into your fourth year, is utilized to make a recommendation in terms of whether you should be regular Army, which is basically career path, active duty, which is a 4-year active duty commitment, or a reserve officer. So those were the three. In my case, I got commissioned as a United States Army Reserve officer, which meant that my ability to go into active duty was compromised. So what I did was I took it upon myself to recognize that, okay, well, I'm not going to become an active duty officer the conventional way, but there was another way. There was another way that I could get in. I could go to my officer's basic course, and if I graduated at the first of my class, then I would be given the option to actually be an active duty officer. So this is this is where I'm rocking and rolling. I'm thinking, yeah, this is how we're going to do this thing. So transitioning now onto May 5th. So May 5th comes around, and I'm now in this unique position where, excuse me. Now I'm in this position where I've now graduated from college. May 5th, I am an RA, resident assistant, which means, for those of you who are not aware, resident assistants are usually are student staff members on the floor whose responsibility is to ensure that the rules of the university is met and various programs have been provided for the benefit of the students, things of that nature. So I was an RA, and one of the protocols is that we had to check students in, inventory their room, make sure everything's good, but then also when they got ready to leave, we had to inventory their room as well. So in my case, when you're graduating, or when students are graduating, what the RA's responsibility is that you can't leave until everybody's left off the floor. So in my case, I had like 2 seniors on my floor. We all graduated together. They actually checked out graduation day. So that meant on May 5th, I didn't have anybody on my floor. All I had to do was go through the rooms, check all the drawers, make sure nobody left anything, make sure nobody broke everything, and start preparing the paperwork so we can transition out. May 5th was a wild situation for me, because May 5th was also the day, my mom left that morning. She and my grandmother flew out, and then my dad, who drove in separately with his family, they drove out after graduation on the 4th. So I was literally in a position where it was quiet. It was just me. And so now I'm trying to reflect on what I have to do next. Because in my case, I graduated in May, but then officer's basic course, and for me it was a chemical officer basic course, was in September. So I'm sitting here the whole time, doing temporary jobs here and there, got a special gig working at the university for the summer, and I'm trying to figure out what life is holding for me going forward. And so I'm sitting here thinking, none of that matters. I already know I'm not going to medical school. I'm not really thinking about graduate school. Let's get this. We're gonna put all of our energy and everything into making this thing happen down at Fort McClellan, Alabama. We got this thing. We rolling, baby. We rolling. So then I report to my officer's basic course in September of 1991, and I am geared up, ready to rock and roll, baby. Woo! To make it shake, rattle, and roll. I had planned on making myself the best in my class. I had it together. So something told me to ask the instructor about this program. And I was just out of curiosity. I asked him, I said, hey, just want to confirm. My understanding is that there was a program that if you are the number 1 graduate in your class, in terms of academics and so forth, you automatically get offered the opportunity to go active duty. And I remember him turning to me and say, Lieutenant, he was a captain, he said, Lieutenant, I hate to tell you this, but that program was discontinued after the last class. And I'm like, what do you mean? The last class was the last class that got the ability to actually do that. So going forward, we are no longer extending that opportunity to reserve officers. So if you graduate number 1, you just be graduating number 1. You won't really be given that opportunity. Let me be the first to tell you, when I heard that, it shook me. Because you've got to keep in mind where I was at the time. I had graduated from college without going into medical school. I had decided that the pathway to becoming a doctor was not a pathway for me. I had not investigated or explored any other options. The other path that I thought was to my professional prosperity and success was becoming an active duty officer in the military. I had put all of my energy and effort into this, and now I am being told that that is not an option. So now all the pathways that I had are now no longer viable. I didn't know what to do with that. I really didn't. I didn't know what to do with that information. So I paused, and I really, really had to ask myself a question. What does this mean for me going forward? So here I am in officer's basic course, realizing the first week of a 5-month course that it doesn't matter what I do. If I'm number one in the class by 1 point or 1,000 points, I'm still going to end this training going back as a reserve officer. And I'm not going to medical school. What do I do now? Now, I can tell you, it's really easy when you find yourself in these positions where you're self-reflecting on a situation, that when you pause and have a situation like this, it can probably drive you to a level of despair. There's something there's something that's powerful about what it means when you plan on doing something and it doesn't come into fruition. And in my case, I had planned for 2 things and neither one of them did. And I have to say, in my defense, I was young. And I was young, and I tended to keep to myself, and I didn't talk to anyone. So in my mind, I did not know what to do next. But to my surprise, something interesting happened. I could have probably easily been depressed for the 5 months when I was there, dwelling on the fact that, oh my God, when I leave here, I have nothing to do. I didn't do that, to my surprise. From that particular point, I took a hard look to see at my decisions. I used that as a break. I used that unexpected situation in terms of those things. Because keep in mind, when I went to college, I thought I was smart. I didn't think that there was no way I wouldn't be a doctor. When I joined the ROTC, I thought I was pretty good. I didn't think there was no way for me not to be an officer. I'm thinking all these different viable options should be available to me. But when they weren't there anymore, I had a moment of self-reflection. I really did. I really had this moment where I sat back, took a hard look at my circumstances, and said to myself, well, wait a minute. What am I going to do? What exactly am I going to do going forward? Because the reality is that in February of 1992, I will be leaving Fort McClellan, Alabama. I better figure out what I want to do next. And it doesn't have to be what I have to do right when I walk out the door, but I better figure out something. And for a brief moment, it was kind of fun because my brain was completely unencumbered. And for those of you who are like, what the hell do you mean unencumbered? There was no restrictions. Because at this point, I wasn't going to be a doctor, wasn't going to be an officer. So what you going to do now? And I think I needed to have that moment. And I'm glad I had that moment early in my life because, I was 22. I'm 22 years old. I got a college degree under my belt. I have a future in front of me that's completely unwritten and unscripted. So what do I want to do? Well, the first thing that I did in my initial evaluation of what I wanted to do was ask myself the question, where do I want to go from here? I had already decided that I did not want to return to Arkansas. As silly as it may seem, I had convinced myself that returning to Arkansas, my hometown, was a failure. And it wouldn't have been a failure, but you got to remember I was 22. In my mind, I wanted to keep going forward. And in my mind, coming back to Pine Bluff, Arkansas, which is where I was from, was going backwards. I went to college in Tampa. I had graduated in Tampa. I had pledged a fraternity in Tampa. I had friends in Tampa. I got commissioned as an officer in Tampa. I got I got a job there in Tampa. I had an opportunity to work for the university in Tampa. I had so many positive things in my growth and development as an adult happen in Tampa. I felt going back to Pine Bluff would be a step backwards. So fortunately for me, one of my good friends made it possible and allowed me the opportunity to crash at his place during my time while I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. So that helped. That really, really, really helped. And so then the next thing I decided to do was just kind of figure out what I wanted to do. What do you actually want to do? And I can tell you this was pivotal because it gave me the opportunity to say, okay, we already know we're not doing that part of your life. What do you want to do with the next part? And as fascinating as it may seem, I had never asked myself that. I think I had already convinced myself in my mind that if I became an officer, my path would be kind of shown for me. I had convinced myself that if I become a doctor, my path would have kind of been shown for me. But once those two things were no longer there, I started to realize I could control what I wanted to do next. And at that point, I just allowed myself to be open to all the possibilities. And you would say, well, what do you mean by that? Well, a couple of things. First of all, I was lucky because I had a chance to enjoy the people around me. Keep in mind, this is the first time, other than going to advanced camp, and I went to there for 5 weeks, and then I went to jump school for 3 weeks out of Fort Benning and so forth. This was the first long-term, like several months. Now, I've been in places where I was like 6-7 weeks here and there. This was a 5-month period of time where I was going to be interacting with people who were from different walks of life, who were officers like me, who were all, and almost everybody was not from Florida. I had one cat that I knew who was from Florida, but he didn't go to school there. He went to school in Tuskegee. So, I'm running the streets. I got a friend of mine from Tuskegee. I'm hanging with a Sigma, hanging with a cat from Howard, cat from Jackson State University, and another guy from Oklahoma State, and another friend from Ole Miss. And so I'm interacting with all these people and listening to them and their experiences and what they're planning on doing. And I'm using that as fuel because guess what? We were all second lieutenants. We were all straight out of college. We had all just graduated. So the whole notion of just all of us being together and talking and interacting was a powerful, powerful feeling. And I took full advantage of it. And it was a wonderful thing. So you got that going on. I then found myself in a situation where as I'm listening to them, I'm just having fun. I mean, this is the first time that I'm outside of Tampa and I'm running with guys and we're just running the streets. I had a girlfriend at the time, so I was driving back and forth to Tampa to see her. But boy, on those weekends where I didn't make the drive, I'm hitting the streets. We're going to Birmingham. For those of you who don't know where Fort McClellan is, Fort McClellan is 60 miles east of Birmingham, 90 miles west of Atlanta on I-20. So literally, where we were at, I was able to go into Birmingham and hang out a few times. I went to Atlanta with my buddy whose friend was in the NFL, and that was a wild adventure. And then there was all these little small towns here and there, so we hit the clubs and just hung out. I enjoyed that breath. I mean, at this point, I had just bought my first car. I am now over the age of 21, and this is the first time I'm actually moving in ways that I had never moved before. But while I was in the midst of kind of, shaking what my mama gave me, I also thought about, well, what kind of future do I want to have? I had always told myself that the person I looked up to, my mom, I wanted to do what she did it wouldn't better. So I always knew she had gotten a master's degree. I wanted to get a master's degree. So it was fascinating because the training schedule we had for us was not that great. We had class scheduled probably about 4 or 5 hours a day. We were PT in the morning, and the rest of the time was ours to study and do whatever we wanted. And so imagine with that reduced schedule, I had plenty of time to do other things like study for graduate exams. And so as fate would have it, I always remember the base was located in Anniston, Alabama. Right down the street was a town called Jacksonville, Alabama. And while I was there was Jacksonville State University was there. I could take the GRE exam there. So I actually prepared and studied. So in addition to studying to be a chemical officer, I studied for the graduate exam and took the graduate exam. I took both of them. I took the special subject matter exam for biology and microbiology, and then I took the general exam. And so then I started exploring going to graduate schools. And it was a wonderful thing because now my mind was refocused. I said, okay, now I can make this graduate thing happen. So this was just awesome. And so when I rolled into February of 1992 and heading towards the end of this, I had a renewed energy about me. I didn't feel like, oh God, this is over. Now I'm going to be broke. Now I'm going to be working by myself and I ain't got no job. No. Actually, I didn't feel anything like that. I actually was excited because now I had convinced myself I wanted to go to graduate school and I wanted to explore employment opportunities that would see what I would be interested in doing. And it was a wonderful, wonderful feeling. And let me tell you what I learned from that 5-month experience, because I don't normally share this with a lot of people, but most people don't know that 5-month break from Arkansas and from Florida was a necessary break for me. It gave me the opportunity to take a step back. It also gave me the opportunity to just breathe and have fun. That's not to imply that I wasn't having fun in college or if I couldn't have fun in Pine Bluff, but this was different because I was being forced out of my normal environment that I had been used to for the last 4 years to looking at the world through a whole different lens. And I needed to see this lens in order to go forward. And it also helped me prepare because I also knew that whatever I was going to do in the future, going to graduate school was going to be part of that future. So whether it be getting a job or not getting a job, I knew that was going to be the case. And so coming out, I realized how important it was to have those moments that, yes, it's great to go to college and have a good time, but when you're in an academic environment and your sole focus is to get, take the classes and financial aid and be involved in organizations and graduating, everything like that, when you are unencumbered and you have the ability to pause, because I literally was in that period of time between when I graduated from college and then when I decided I was going to start pursuing the graduate route, it was a welcome change. And it was something that I didn't realize that I truly needed. And it was important because it gave me clarity. It let me know. And it was funny because when I got out, some of my other friends were, trying to find jobs and was trying to find themselves. I had the break where they were trying to kind of figure out what they were going to do next. I had the ability to enjoy that transition and that break because I was in the military. I was getting paid. I was living in a specific confined environment, because I was staying in the officers' quarters on base. I was operating in enough infrastructure that gave me the ability to see clarity both personally and professionally. We don't always get that. So I don't want anybody to say, man, you make it seem so easy. I was like, no, it wasn't easy because the reality is that not everybody has that luxury. Because let me tell you something. There are plenty of people who have found themselves in those moments in life where they have a break, whether they want it or not, and don't do anything productive with it. I was lucky. I was able to do something with it. So what does that leave us today? I'm going to invite you to let me know your moments where you've had those chances to reset and reflect. And I also want to ask you this. What's a path that you thought you'd take, but you didn't? And when was the last time you paused and you reassessed? I can tell you that like me, I've had this happen a couple of times during the course of my professional career, from the time of coming out of college, even now in my 50s. You truly get the opportunity to embrace those things when you realize that, with life coming at you at 100 miles an hour, every now and then, you should take the opportunity to take an off-ramp and relax and rest at a rest area. So I want you to embrace the detours and life's pauses. They're going to come, whether you want to or not, they're going to happen. So I want you not to treat them as these bumps in the road that are just distracting you from what you're trying to do, and stop and say, here's a moment you can take a moment, if you can, to breathe, reflect, and reassess on what you're trying to do. Because you may be surprised. Those pauses don't come as much as you think so. But the reality is that those pauses are necessary to help you get to where you're supposed to go. All right, everyone. Again, thank you for joining me as always. If you didn't know, go check me out on Patreon at anthonyreeves.com. I've got a lot of great content like that. Ebooks, behind the scenes, early notices of early posting of podcasts and blogs, things of that nature. Anthony Reeves Experience. Go there. You're going to have a blast. As always, if you want to, you can subscribe to me on anthonyreeves.com and you can stay up to date with everything that's popping. Thank you for taking the opportunity to join me today. And as always, I'm going to end this with my favorite question of the day. Are you ready for the Anthony Reeves Experience?